There are many things that make the Yakuza games as memorable as they are to those that play them. Some I love the stories the games tell, others like the combat that the games have, whether it be juggling, wall bounding, or back combos. Some may like the music the games have, and others may love the many mini games that the games in the series have. While all of that is definitely true, I feel like the one thing that makes the games truly stand out from others are the heat mechanic and heat actions. If you clicked on this video, you probably know what both of those are, but for the uninitiated, heat is a mechanic in the Yakuza slash Like a Dragon games in which after doing some damage to enemies in combat, you gain heat. Depending on the game, this heat is then used for certain actions. If you have never played these games, there's still a chance you may know what I'm talking about. Yep, that. Think of heat as a special bar in other games, and the heat actions as the super moves you can do as a result. While I do feel that the heat mechanic is what makes the Yakuza games so special, heat as well as heat actions have regressed over the past few games. Heat not only has taken a backseat, but also just kinda sucks now. In this video, I hope to look at most of the Yakuza games and argue how heat went from being a central and unique mechanic in the earlier games to now just being a shell of its former self. To do this, I wanted to base my opinions off of 4 factors. The first is heat gain. How easy is it to gain heat as well as a full heat bar? Second is heat uses. What exactly can you use heat for? Number 3 is heat actions. Are the heat actions in a game good and varied? And finally is something I'm calling spectacle. Do you want to have heat, and when you have heat, does it feel good to have heat? Before beginning, I do want to put out some disclaimers. Number 1, there are multiple games that are going to be excluded, and those games are in 3 groups. The first group are games that I just have not played, and as a result would not feel comfortable talking about. This includes Yakuza 1, Yakuza 2, RGG Kenzan, Kurohyou 1 and 2, Yakuza Dead Souls, RGG Ishin, or just OG Ishin, and Fist of the North Star Lost Paradise. The second group of games are games that just do not fit the mold of the beat 'em up formula. This includes Yakuza Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, and Yakuza 5 Haruka. She is a character, but she doesn't fit the mold, obviously, so she's here. And the third group of games, or should I just say game, is Like a Dragon Ishin. Simply put, my PS5 messed up on downloading it, and I just don't think it's worth it for the video since a lot of people probably just don't have Ishin. I do like the game, but I just don't think it's worth the time or effort. Number 2, this is not an analysis of the combat of any of the games. Please, 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 this is important. Keep this in mind. If I say a game manages heat well, that does not mean I think the combat is good. Please just keep that in mind. Number 3, most of my gameplay for many of the games are after not having played them for at least a year. As a result, some of my gameplay may just look bad, and I understand that they may have some sway on my feelings of heat in a particular game, but even then I like to think I presented these fairly based on my criteria. Number 4, in the video I'll mention something called group fights multiple times. Just know that when I say group fights, they're the same thing as history encounters. So yeah, group fights are just history encounters. I just say group fights. Number 5, lastly, this is all my opinion. If you disagree with me, leave a comment down below. With all this being said, let's finally start by looking at the games, starting with Yakuza 3 as well as its remaster. When looking into Yakuza 3, I found that heat in this game is fine. For starters, uses of heat are pretty standard fare. Some of the more interesting ones include the inability to be knocked down and invincibility. Kiryu also has a signature bounding throws, which can be used in heat. These enable a certain risk reward that I like with heat. You can use the heat on heat actions to be done with them, or you can keep it and use abilities such as the ones in Yakuza 3 Soul Tree, like invincibility. When looking at the heat actions, this game easily has some of the best ones, and if you want to include the feel the heat actions as well, the variety is pretty good. Not only that, they also do a moderate amount of damage considering it's Yakuza 3, the game where Kiryu does the least amount of damage, especially against bosses. There is also a desire to have heat, so I am giving it the spectacle point that I mentioned earlier, for the reasons stated. Really good heat actions and abilities that are good in heat. All this being said, there is one thing about Yakuza 3's heat that I don't really like, and that is the heat gain. The heat gain in this game is just really bad. Don't get me wrong, the actual gain itself would be fine, but the time it takes for your heat to go down and the amount of heat you'll lose is pretty bad. This doesn't even take into account how the remaster makes these problems even worse. The heat loss and how quickly you lose it, even worse in the remaster. In the group fights you're watching, you'll notice that I barely get any heat, and enemies are still aggressive enough to where you just lose a bunch of heat anyway, even accounting the fact that they're blocking as well. The boss fights do lessen this to a certain amount, and depending on the fight, it's not that bad, so sometimes even just really good. Even though Yakuza 3 gets all the other points, it falls flat on its face when it comes to actually getting the heat, but trust me, this is only the beginning. It gets worse. Overall, I feel that Yakuza 3 is fine, above okay, but not good, just fine. I should note I don't entirely hold this against Yakuza 3 because this was the first global Yakuza game that they made for the PS3, so I can imagine that they took what they learned here and would make Yakuza 4, and oh boy, it's absolute whiplash. Yakuza 4 came out after Yakuza 3 and it shows. Heat in this game is one of the few mechanics that does a complete 180 from 3. In Yakuza 3, heat was slow to get and would be lost relatively quickly compared to the newer games. But in 4, it's not only easy to get, but you keep it for a while. It does not matter if you're in a group fight or boss fights, you would definitely have heat, and I think my gameplay speaks for itself. I'm gaining heat very quickly, I'm using that heat, and I'm gaining again just as quickly. Not only that, but the uses for heat differ with each character in such a way that the spectacle aspect is definitely there. Saejima has abilities that make him feel like a tank in heat mode. Tanemura has some abilities that he could use in heat, but his style in general is a technical beast that heavily relies on heat. And Kiryu is a mix of these abilities, including being able to heal himself with gained heat. And his bounding throws, of course. Heat is extremely special here since the game highlights the importance of heat to each character easily. Saejima, for example, has the least amount of heat bars, meaning that heat is not as important to him, whereas Tanemura has the most, meaning he relies on heat the most. Heat actions are also very good. They are both effective in the amount of damage they do, and they are varied and flashy when split between the 4 characters. More interesting is how the flashiness is shown. Akiyama's heat actions are quick and deadly. Saejima's heat actions demonstrate just how strong he is. Tanemura's are some of the more technical in the game. And Kiryu is a mix of all of them, and he also has a differentiation in the fact that he's the only character that also gets a red heat. There are also not many changes between this and the remaster, except for one, but we'll talk about it later. Honestly, there's only 2 things I could really fault Yakuza 4 with. The first is that weapon heat actions are kinda hard to do against bosses. This was in Yakuza 3 as well, but again, first PS3 game, I don't fault it that much. But it's still here, and pretty much boss enemies move around a lot, and as a result, it's kinda hard to get off some weapon heat actions. And the second is that Akiyama, the one character with multiple abilities regarding taunting and gaining heat, does not have any uses for that heat except for heat actions. This seems like a complete oversight and a missed opportunity since I think he could have had something really good going on. Overall, Yakuza 4's heat is pretty good and dare I say almost perfect if not for the complaints I had. It's crazy to see how we went from Yakuza 3 to this. Now we move on to Yakuza 5. For the amount of time I find Yakuza 5 to be a wildly interesting game, he is handled pretty well. For starters, actually getting the heat is pretty good. It's not overbearingly slow like in Yakuza 3, nor is it too fast like in Yakuza 4, but it still allows the players to perform multiple heat actions without having the feeling that they are wasting those heat actions. Not only that, but each character has a red heat bar that fills up when doing enough heat actions. There is one note on heat gain that I should mention, which applies to all 3 games I have already mentioned. Well, at least they're remasters. And it's that when you get grabbed, you lose heat extremely fast. I have no idea why, I don't know if this happens in the originals, but considering how unlikely it is that you'll be grabbed, it's something to be cautious of, but it's not a deal breaker when it comes to heat gain. Some characters also have some other uses for heat, such as Saitama's Herculean spirit, which makes him an immovable object. Again, the only one lacking in this department is Akiyama, but it's made up for the fact that he has Launch Strike, a move in Yakuza 5 that uses heat other than heat actions. Every character has their own special move like Launch Strike, and it helps with heat use greatly. These uses become even better here since heat actions from Yakuza 4 onwards do less damage when they are repeated. It's not as big of a deal in Yakuza 4 since you just do a lot of damage and enemies have so little health, so it's greatly appreciated at least in Yakuza 5. Heat actions are also pretty good. Many of the same heat actions are here from Yakuza 4, but there are some new ones including Kiryu's face grading heat action and all of Shinada's heat actions, which he has a surprising amount of. It is honestly surprising the amount of detail they put into the heat actions he could do. Heat also has the spectacle element thanks to its multiple uses and because heat actions are amazing in this game. There are some issues, however. First, the throws that Kiryu and Shinada do not have a heat requirement. This isn't so bad for Shinada since I find them to be a little hard to execute, but with Kiryu, these throws have AoE, grants invincibility, and are not difficult to execute at all, and since they don't have a heat requirement, they can be spammed and they are extremely powerful as a result. Not only that, but the counters in this game, especially Saitama and Kiryu's, were the first to really do damage and be easy to execute, all without using up any heat. This all makes heat feel a lot less important in this game compared to the earlier entries, and while still good, definitely takes a nosedive in comparison to something like Yakuza 4. This all being said, it's still very good. Now we move on to Yakuza 0. When it comes to heat, Yakuza 0 does so much right. For starters, getting a full heat bar is extremely easy in this game. Every style except for Mad Dog can get a full heat bar easily, which is a pretty good thing, because you could easily use your favorite style to gain the heat, and then use that heat on another style seamlessly. This leads to players not only being able to experiment with heat actions as well as the many heat abilities, but doing so in a way that doesn't feel like they're wasting their heat otherwise. Not only that, but the gear system completely complements the uses of heat in this game. Many of you may know what I am talking about when I say the gear system, but for the uninitiated, here is the rundown. So that's your heat bar. You notice it'll have 3 lines. Right next to it is a number. This goes from 1 to 2 to 3. This number indicates what line your heat is on. So as you can see in the clip, that my heat is on a certain line, and as a result, the number corresponds to that line. If I have my full heat bar, or my line goes into my third heat bar, I'll be in third gear. If it's in the second one, it's in second, and if I'm not even full on one, it's in first gear. Back to the video. The gear system's relation to heat in this game is fantastic, as it can affect many things. It can affect your combat speed and the abilities you could do. You remember all those solo abilities that were in the other games? Well, Zero decides to take the same concept and put them between the different gears and styles, and gives the players lots of choices for the uses of their heat. You can choose between doing heat actions and being in specific gears with their unique abilities, or you can choose to stay in third heat and always have max combat speed. There are so many uses for heat in this game, I don't even think I can mention them all within a timely manner. Next, the heat actions in this game are really good. While some of them have been seen in some of the earlier games, both those and the ones that were new to this game are on the same level of flashiness as many of the earlier ones. You see that? See how his leg just completely bends there? When I saw that for the first time, it shocked me so bad. I said, "Oh my god," out of sheer shock. I was terrified that I saw that. Lastly is the spectacle that the game has, and I feel like it passes with flying colors. Everything from how quick you get heat to the heat actions themselves, and even how each style uses heat, all come together to make heat feel absolutely amazing in this game. I can say without a doubt that this game has the best heat mechanics in the series, and personally whenever I revisit it, I remember just how good this game is as a result. Next, we'll talk about Kiwami. So you'll probably notice two things. The first is that I have no Kiwami gameplay. The main reason for this is because I just don't have Kiwami anymore, and as a result, I have no relevant gameplay. This doesn't mean I haven't played Kiwami. My backlog of videos show that I have played Kiwami a lot, and I also have the platinum for the game, so I have some idea as to what I'm talking about. The second thing you'll notice is that this section is rather small, and this is because this game's heat is extremely similar to Yakuza 0, but it's just slightly worse. Take everything I said about Zero, and it will mostly apply here. Some things that add to the experience are how charged heat actions are a thing in this game, and they give you lots of damage. Another thing are the time 4 effects. The most popular of these being time for Godspeed, which lets you hit with the speed of a crackhead. Really, the only things I could say that make it worse is the fact that heat gain is slightly worse for Beast and Dragon, and that Tiger Drop exists. The reason is because it makes most people just Tiger Drop rather than engaging with the combat at all, including heat. Overall, Kiwami handles heat pretty good, but just with some minor setbacks. With this, we move on to the Dragon engine. So with all the games in the older engines discussed, we now move on to the Dragon Engine games, with all the lessons they learned from those earlier games. When moving on to a new engine, they must have been able to refine what made heat so good in many of these early games. That's what they did, right? Right? Surprisingly, the Dragon Engine's first outing with Yakuza 6 is actually pretty good when it comes to heat. I was surprised, but the heat gain here is actually pretty good. I don't have too many complaints in regards to it, and I believe it is partly to do with the fact that they went with a heat orb system rather than a traditional heat bar. Not only that, but one of the skills is related to heat gain as well, and it lets you just have flat out increased heat generation. As for the uses of that heat, well, for one, again, you can do heat actions, but the game also allows you to go into something called Extreme Heat Mode. This is a mode where Kiryu gets a slightly different combo, does more damage, takes less damage, and unlocks new heat actions. There is far much less emphasis on what he can do, but Extreme Heat ends up doing many of the soul abilities that were in the previous game. Some might see this as an upside, I personally don't and see this as a downside. You can also freely use Extreme Heat as long as you have one heat orb, but so for now, it's pretty good. As for heat actions in this game, they're pretty good, but that's more or less because, well, this is the first Dragon Engine game. Everything is new here, and as a result, there's a lot of experimentation. One of my favorite additions to Extreme Heat, and more specifically as a result, is that every single finish that Kiryu does while in Extreme Heat has its own heat action that corresponds with it. Lastly, when it comes to the spectacle aspect that I talked about, I believe Yakuza 6 is pretty good. Again, part of this is probably because of the Dragon engine, but I think it overall just does a good job. Overall, Yakuza 6 handles heat better than I expected. I dare say it's pretty good. The Dragon engine being new means players want to experiment with heat and see what it can do. It also helps that the heat actions are pretty good. I hate to say it, but it's mostly downhill from here. Kiwami 2's heat feels weird. It seems like a transition period when it comes to heat. For starters, the heat gain itself feels kinda weird. Sometimes it's very good, but sometimes it's very bad. You have a gigantic heat bar, but it takes forever to actually raise said heat bar. You have a taunt that can help, but unless you get the final upgrade, it's lackluster at best in terms of actually helping you gain heat. As for the uses of said heat, it's pretty much all the same as Yakuza 6. Heat actions and extreme heat. Extreme heat is worse in the aspect that you must be at a full heat bar to do it. If you don't, you can't use extreme heat. It's a needless restriction, especially considering that the game can be played without it entirely. The one saving grace Kiwami 2 has in terms of its heat is its heat actions. Lots of them are reused with some new ones, but the buddy heat actions that are available around both maps are a nice breath of fresh air. Not only that, but since Kiryu actually has the ability to hold on to weapons in this game, he also has an expanded range of heat actions he could do as a result compared to Yakuza 6. The heat actions themselves, as I said earlier, are still varied and powerful, so I can give them a pass. Finally, this is the first game in my opinion that fails the spectacle check I've been talking about. The only thing that the game does really well when it comes to heat are the heat actions. He has no real standout features in this game apart from extreme heat. But that was in Yakuza 6 too, so I don't really see the point of giving it that. Something else I would argue is the absence of the heat aura. No, not the extreme heat aura, a normal heat aura like in 3 through Kiwami. The absence of this lessens the spectacle in my opinion, since the game itself doesn't want you to be excited to have heat. And if the game doesn't want me to make me excited to have heat, the spectacle is mostly lost. Overall, Kiwami 2 is kinda bad. When compared to the other games, Heat feels like a step down in almost every aspect other than Heat actions. Worse more is that this game marks what I would consider the beginning of Heat's downfall in the franchise. Well, with Kiwami 2 done, maybe their new game series, Judgment, would do any better. Let's see. Judgment's handling of Heat shifts slightly from Kiwami 2, but I still don't believe it to be that great. For starters though, Heat gain is surprisingly really good in this game and better than I remembered it being. The game gives the player upgrades that make Heat gain a lot better, and there's also the Flux Fisher skill, but we're going to pretend that doesn't exist for a moment. As for the uses that Heat has, say it with me now, Heat actions and Extreme Heat. That's it. Extreme Heat in this game has the extra function of giving Yagami 2 new combos using only the heavy attack button, one in Crane and another in Tiger. Apart from that, Extreme Heat is the same old. As for Heat actions, since this is a new game with a new character, they have a novelty of being pretty good. This being said, I don't think novelty alone makes these Heat actions good, as I think they're just good and varied Heat actions. There are some reused ones, but the ones they reuse fit Yagami's fighting styles, so they're not too bad. Lastly, the spectacle of Heat is wishy-washy. I can't say it completely passes, but I also don't believe it fails. Personally, no Heat aura goes a really long way. The Heat actions in Extreme Heat are good, but they alone stop carrying spectacle. Yakuza 6 could get away with this because it was a new engine, but every game afterwards has pretty much failed in this department for me. Overall, Judgment is definitely okay. It's the best I feel we have of the Dragon Engine games when it comes to Heat. Heat and heat actions carry the game in terms of how I feel about heat, and it's sad to see the loss in creativity heat has gone with a lack of heat uses. With this, we move on to the supposed best game in the series, Lost Judgment. While being the game most people believe has the best combat, Lost Judgment definitely feels worse in the heat department. For starters, heat gain felt specifically bad. I have to be completely honest and say I revisited this game at least twice to test heat gain alone, since I thought I was doing something wrong. But I genuinely think it just doesn't have good heat gain. You have 6 heat bars, but more often than not, you only get 1, maybe 2 in a group fight, and this is with max heat gain upgrades. And as for boss fights, the same thing applies. You get 1, maybe 2, but at least bosses have more health, so you could get at least more heat actions off, because you get more heat? At that point, I feel like the 6 bars are unnecessary. Not only that, but EX Boost uses up your heat really quickly, so I feel that heat gain feels worse as a result, since what you work so hard to get is lost even quicker. As for the uses of heat, again, it's heat actions and extreme heat, which at this point just feels repetitive and they're not trying to do anything more with heat. It does suck that a lot of the cool things you can do with heat is limited behind extreme heat though. This is especially the case since extreme heat, again, drains your heat very quickly. Heat actions are again pretty good though. The introduction of Snake and Boxer add new heat actions that are flashy and fit well with the styles. Crane and Tiger also got some new heat actions as well. Lastly, the spectacle of heat in Lost Judgment is gone. Not only is there no heat aura, but heat in general just got left behind. To put it bluntly, if you were to ask me how I felt about Lost Judgment's combat, I would say it's pretty good. But if you were to ask me how I felt about Lost Judgment's heat, I would say it was left behind. Before giving my overall thoughts, I want to quickly discuss the Kaito files because the GOAT asked me to, and yeah, I feel mostly the same. Heat gain isn't amazing, heat uses aren't great, heat actions are good, and there is no spectacle to heat. Overall, heat sucks in Lost Judgment. There is no spectacle, heat gain is bad, and the uses of heat have lowered dramatically. This is even more concerning when you take into account their last original beat-em-up, Judgment, was almost 3 years before this. Here's hoping Gaiden was able to somehow improve on this. Well, now we're on to Gaiden, and what do you know? They made things worse. Heat gain is absolutely awful, and I think my gameplay speaks for itself. It takes me 3 group fights to get even 1 heat bar. 1. Fighting bosses is even worse since, as the gameplay shows, I fight 2 Coliseum bosses and only end up getting 1 heat bar on the last fight. You can make the argument that I have max damage, but if you use that argument here, then explains to me why max damage in both Judgment and Zero still allowed heat gain to be serviceable in both of those games. Heck, even though I don't have Kiwami footage, Kiwami 1 with max upgrades also had good heat gain, but here in Gaiden, I can't even get 1 bar from 1 fight, rather be a group fight or a boss fight. The uses of heat are also pretty bad since, again, it's only extreme heat and heat actions. The one saving grace is the fact that Agent Style also has some actions you can do in extreme heat, but again, that's extreme heat, not heat. Now, this is usually the part of the review where I talk about how heat actions are the best part about the game, and they're the one saving grace for heat. But I can't even give Gaiden that. The heat actions in this game are lackluster at best. There's very few of them, and most of the ones that are here are reused, and the ones that are reused aren't even that good. This is a shame since the new Agent heat actions are really good, but they are easily overshadowed by the fact that the core roster of heat actions are extremely limited. Oh yeah, and Kiryu's extreme heat finishers from Kiwami 2 and 6? They're gone. Lastly, the spectacle of heat again is completely gone from Gaiden. There is realistically nothing special about it, and this is a gigantic missed opportunity in my opinion, especially considering Yakuza style could have perfectly used heat in contrast to all of Agent's gadgets. Overall, heat is extremely bad in this game. I would have argued that it is the worst in this series, but at least Gaiden has multiple heat bars. I can't say the same thing for the next game. The final game we will be covering is also RGG's newest release in the form of Like a Dragon, Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii. I can say despite the flaws many have, I consider it one of my favorite games in this series. However, even with it being one of my favorites, Heat is easily the worst in this game than any of the other games in this series. To start, Heat gain is bad as it was in Gaiden, but it's even further ruined by two factors. The first is that taunting does absolutely nothing. In previous games, taunting had two abilities. Number one, it gave you heat, and number two, in some of the games, it gave you a heat action. Here, taunting does absolutely nothing. No heat action, no heat. In general, heat is worse because of it. The other thing is that you only have one heat bar in Pirate Yakuza. This incentivizes using the heat as soon as you have enough, but by using it, you may end up wasting it instead of having it available at a later time. The uses of heat are also laughably bad in this game. Heat has two uses, heat actions and counterattacks. Yeah, they got rid of extreme heat in this game and replaced it with something else. Would you believe that? Back on topic though. The two counterattacks you can do with it are almost never worth it. They do about the same damage as a heat action and also use up all your heat. At this point, you may as well argue heat only has one use in this game. The heat actions in this game are also very bad. Did you know there is no ground heat action in Pirate Yakuza? Yes, you can't do any sort of heat action when your enemy is on the ground and while you are unarmed in this game. Need I remind you, this game was made in 2025. Not only that, but the new Sea Dog heat actions have only really one flashy heat action while the rest are lazy in their animation. This is worsened by the fact that all of Mad Dog's heat actions except for one are just reused, and the one that they have, you'll almost never do it. It just feels kinda lazy. If I had to guess, there are about 10 realistic heat actions in this game, realistic as in you'd actually want to use them, and about 3 to 5 of them can only be used against multiple targets. There are also companion heat actions, but you will likely never use these. And you could make the argument, hey, heat actions do damage. And I'd say you're right, they do. But so does comboing. So does, your pistol. Heat actions are the only thing that do damage in this game. So with them also just being kind of bad, it's like, why even use them? Lastly, there is absolutely no spectacle in having heat in this game. It takes forever to get heat, and when you do get it, the game doesn't care enough to tell you that you have it. Pirate Yakuza's handling of heat is easily the worst in the series, and there is absolutely no competition. So before I do conclude this video, I wanted to talk about some counter arguments some people may have to the points I made in this video, starting with skills that give you heat. When I was measuring heat gain in every single game, I was basing it off of just using normal rush combos and finishers, nothing else. Some of the games have skills that increase your heat. These are skills like taunting and the Flux Fisher upgrade in Judgment that I said just doesn't exist. Simply put, yeah, these skills do give you heat, but one, these abilities are sometimes locked behind ludicrous upgrades. For example, the Kiwami 2 Ultimate Taunt, which gives you a full heat bar, can only be unlocked after defeating all the street bosses. That's not a hard thing to do, but it's stupid that to have good heat gain, I have to do something like that. And number two, if I started to include these abilities as part of my rubric for heat gain, the games with already good heat gain become even better. At that point, most of my rankings will still remain the same, with the only ones probably changing being Gaiden and Pirate Yakuza to just straight up being worse. The second counter I have listed here is the idea of using Torrenter or being drunk. For those of you who don't know, there are two items in this game that can help with heat gain. Torrenter/Staminans, which just give you heat, and alcohol, which gives you the drunk status effect, with the drunk status effect just increasing your heat gain overall. While yes, both of these can be used to gain heat, I don't think either are a good solution to a problem that just should not exist. They perfected heat in the earlier games, and that was without the need for either items nor drunkenness. Not only that, but they should be add-ons rather than necessities. And finally, if I do count either item in games that have bad heat gain, I have to count them as a point across the board for all the games. And in my opinion, if I do that, again, my rankings don't change. The final counter I do have is kind of weak, but I still wanted to include it, and it's the idea that the combat in the games are good, so why should Heat be good as a result? And while yes, I can't say the combat in the later games that I have talked about are good, I don't think that is an excuse for making Heat as bad as it is. I can admit the combat is good, but then how does that separate the series from any other beat 'em up? Heat offers a unique twist on the formula to separate it from any other beat 'em up, but it's substantially gone worse over time. So, with all that, I state again, Heat sucks now. It has gone progressively worse since the Dragon Engine. As for how I'd go about fixing this, the simple answer is to number 1, make Heat easier to get, and number 2, give it a lot of abilities like it had in the older games. Limiting Heat to players doesn't make engagement with combat more fun, but lessens people who want to do loads of Heat actions can't, and people who want to use extreme Heat or the Heat abilities, rather they just can't do that, or they can only do so for short periods of time before it runs out. With RGG's newest projects on the horizon, they should take a look at the games that really did Heat well. Yakuza 4 and 0 for the older engines, and Yakuza 6 and Judgment for the newer ones. To take the feature that once elevated their combat and now feels lackluster, and bring it back to a new age of glory. Alright everyone, thank you for watching the video. I appreciate that you watched it, took your time to watch it, yada yada yada. This video was a lot harder than I thought it would be. Really overestimated a lot of things I had to do, and as a result, here we are. This video has been like months in the planning, and just this took me too long to do, I'll admit. But it's a video I did want to do, and I hope you guys enjoy it. This is my first video with actual commentary in it, so if you have any improvements, let me know. Overall, just yeah, thank you for watching the video, and goodbye.